All right, man. We had UFC 271, Israel Adesanya versus Robert Whittaker 2, the rematch. And man, this fight was good. It was interesting though, in the sense that I don't necessarily felt that it lived up to the excitement that you would typically want from a Izzy fight. But at the same time, I thought that it was a high level fight. And it also showed, man, just where Izzy's level is in terms of just his MMA ability. So with the fight, obviously, like I said, the last time these two guys fought, Israel ends up knocking out Robert Whittaker in the second round. It was a good fight. I thought that at the time, though, that Whittaker, he was having just a lot of near misses, and granted, Izzy is great in terms of how slick he is in the octagon, his defense and stuff like that, just being able to step away from stuff. But you just never think that it's to that level over, a 10 round situation here, because you're talking about two fights. But it proved to be the case. I thought that early on, man, Robert Whittaker was definitely doing some nice things in terms of trying to be a little bit more physical, try to, make it a little bit more muddy of a fight, not as glamorous. And I think that was part of the reason why, optics wise, it didn't, wow the casual fans. But the one thing that I would say, man, was this: Izzy, man, his ability to just control the distance, his ability to get off punches whenever he wanted to me, that was the telling thing in this fight. Early in the first round, Izzy put Robert Whittaker on the ground. He was tagging him up, touching him up. I mean, he looked good. He was flying around loose. The kicks, it was just like Robert could not close that distance. Then second, third, fourth round, it starts to change a little bit, because Izzy is still controlling the distance, still fighting on the outside, and Robert really can't land anything in terms of punches and bunches or any type of significant ground and pound when he would be able to take Izzy to the ground. And for me, when I'm watching, I'm like, man, for everything that I would want to give Robert in terms of maybe giving him a round here or there, it was just hard, because for everything that he did good, Israel did something just as good, and ultimately still looked like he was controlling the center of the octagon, still looked like he was the more aggressive fighter as well, and definitely was the more active fighter. So with that, when I'm watching Robert take Israel down, and I'm like, okay, these takedowns are nice, but where's the ground and pound? There wasn't any, because Israel did such a great job of just popping up. Him at 185 is way too big versus those guys when they're trying to take him down. And outside of when he bumped up to fight Jan Blachowicz for the light heavyweight belt, that was the only guy that could really control Izzy and keep him down because of the strength element, because of the size factor. But Izzy at 185, he is a nightmare for those guys, because they can't take him down, and he has the ability to drop them with his hands. And you could see with Robert, I felt like Robert was doing enough to stay in the fight. He was doing just enough to keep it competitive, but he wasn't going to risk it all to actually go for the win. And I felt like that was his gift and curse in this fight. I felt like if he would have been a little bit more aggressive, maybe he lands a knockout, because it was a couple of shots that he would hit Izzy with that, man, he was catching them clean, but he just wasn't throwing it enough and wasn't throwing it with enough reckless abandon. But then I thought of, man, the first fight, he was a little bit more reckless and he got knocked out. So I understood that balance that he was trying to have. But in the end, I felt like he was a little bit too calculated, a little bit too reserved, versus a fighter of Izzy's caliber and having the output that he was having as well. But as a whole, man, it was good to see Izzy, come back and continue to look good at 185, continue to look dominant. His hands look fast. I know in the fight, man, he kept rubbing his hand, and I thought his hand was hurt, because even though he said everything was fine and he said it was a part of his stance and all that, because, he does all that weird stuff. Not weird, I don't want to call it weird, but different stuff in terms of, just his showmanship and his gamesmanship. Even though he says that his hand wasn't hurt, he never really threw that right hand again outside of that first with, the same type of precision and the same type of power with it. So I'm interested to see what was going on with that, because to me, I think if he's throwing that right hand a lot more in the middle rounds, I don't think the fight is anywhere close as it actually was. But because he was only throwing with that left hand and using his legs, it just, like I said, makes you question what was going on with that in terms of his health and things. But as a whole, I mean, this is Izzy. Izzy at 185, he is going to be extremely difficult to beat. Now, going forward, it's going to be interesting, because he says he wants to fight again in June. And the guy that we know that fight's going to be with is Jared Cannonier, who obviously fought Derek Brunson as the third fight on the main card, and that was an interesting fight as well. Jared, man, did some pretty cool things, man, in that fight. Showed his toughness because he had got rocked early on, almost got submitted early on, but got saved by the bell. Then he comes back and he delivers a mean elbow to Blonde Brunson, and he made him Blood Bronson. That's what he said he wanted to do. I know, it was kind of crazy, but either way, that was exciting because, like I said, man, you got to see who was the next guy. Those two guys were fighting to see who was going to get that chance to fight the winner of the Izzy and Robert Whittaker fight. So now that we know it's going to be Izzy versus Jared Cannonier, I'm excited about it because it's somebody different. We don't have to see another rematch or trilogy with whoever. But at the same time, forgive me for not being as excited about Izzy fighting Cannonier. I just think that Izzy at 185, man, he's going to continue to be a nightmare for those guys, man. But you know what? Y'all let me know your thoughts on the fight between Israel Adesanya and Robert Whittaker, and also let me know your thoughts on the potential matchup between Israel and Jared Cannonier, man. I think, like I said, either way, it's gonna be fun watching Izzy continue to step in this octagon right now during his prime, man. But like I said, man, I definitely enjoyed it. I hope y'all did as well, and I appreciate you for tuning in. And until next time, baby, peace.